Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Cardone, and I'm chairman of the chapel. And on behalf of the chapel board and our 4 congregations, we want to welcome you. It's a very special night, and we're here to celebrate. We're here to celebrate you, our donors to our capital campaign who built our building, and those of you who donate to the annual appeal to keep the building thriving and our chapel thriving. Your visionary leadership and your vision for the chapel and your commitment to the community has made this one of the busiest venues on the Reef. We're open 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's just busy. That's all I can tell you. We had 900 events here this year. There are Bible studies, there's all kinds of meetings and services. So look in your website and you'll see what's going on. We want to take a minute to thank our board of directors who have really worked hard to keep this chapel running, our executive committee, and our 4 congregation leaders. They lead their congregations. They organize those 900 events, and they are very special people and dedicated not only to the chapel, but to the Lord. There's another group of remarkable people we want to honor tonight that have worked diligently to get us here, and that's our planning and construction committee, chaired by Nelson Sims, Gail Guyton, and Chris Carlson. They, along with 6 subcommittees, 35 members of all 4 congregations, and the founding board, chaired by Jay Holmes. They contracted for the building before COVID. They built it during COVID, and it came in on budget and just in time for the first wedding. So thank you, building committee. You just did a great, great job. We also want to say thank you to the Ocean Reef Community Foundation for recognizing us as a recipient partner. Their support has been just incredible for the building, and along with what they do with the other centers here, the cultural center, the medical center. It's just a wonderful community to be part of. The program tonight is going to be very special. You're going to really enjoy it. We want to say thank you to our sponsors in the traditional Ocean Reef way. We have Sotheby's International. Let's give them a clap. Rust Post, and Precision Landscaping, and First Horizon. Thank you for making this night possible, and I'm introduce to you our chaplain in residence, Dr. Dan Meyer, who will introduce to you the program tonight. Thank you for coming.
I don't need that, thank you. It's all yours. Well, good evening, and what a joy it is to see your beautiful faces for this wonderful night of celebration. We are so pleased that you took the time to be here this evening and to join in what we hope will be an unforgettable series of experiences. Many, many years ago, way back in the 17th century, there lived a poet and a playwright by the name of Ben Jonson, Jonson. He was the second best known literary figure of his age, just edged out by a man named Shakespeare. But Jonson wrote some beautiful things, and one of those quotations that have lived down through the years I want to cite for you tonight because it, I think, says something important about this occasion. Jonson once observed, he said, "True happiness or wealth in life consists not only in the multitude of one's friends, but in their worth and choice." By that particular measure, those of us who have had the privilege of being connected to the other people who make the chapel their home when they're here on the Reef, at least a more important part of that marvelous setting, those of us who've had that experience are wealthy and happy people indeed. When the chapel was founded back in 1970, it had a simple mission to be a gathering place for those who wanted to worship on the weekends. But in the 55 years since that time, it has continued to evolve and to expand in its reach and its mission. And today is something different altogether. It's a place that now houses 4 vibrant congregations, each with their own distinctive qualities and leadership and offerings to the community. It's a place of learning and love that anybody can show up in. It's a place where people, associates, members, friends can come and just find solace and encouragement for the journey of life. It's become a granary in a sense, a seed house that has helped to spread hope and healing and help to people in practical need circumstances. In fact, this coming Monday, the grounds here will be sponsoring a partnership with the foundation to put on a food drive that's going to help meet the needs of under-resourced people in our region. But maybe most significantly, the chapel has become a place that is pushing against the tide of separation, isolation, and alienation that defines so much of the world. It's a community of people that have dedicated themselves to being a force for unity in a divided world. And that is why we selected that particular topic as our theme for this evening, and we're so pleased that you could be a part of this with us. As Michael Cardone said so well, all of this is possible only because of real people like you, whose gifts of self, of substance, continue to make this incredible ministry possible. And so our goals for tonight are very simple ones, 4 in total. First, we just want to express our thanks for you. And that's not a lighthearted thought. We believe that you are the reason why we exist and can go on together. 2, we want to engage you in an historic moment, as we will have an opportunity tonight to hear about some unique artifacts related to the scriptures, the Bible, which forms the unifying post at the center of the chapel's life. We're going to hear from the Museum of the Bible leadership from Washington, D.C., as they present some unique artifacts that will be housed here in an ongoing way. And you'll have a chance later tonight to actually set your eyes on them. And we also want to enrich you through a provocative discussion and a question and answer around our major theme for this evening that involves a couple of very luminous thinkers on so many important topics for our time. And then last of all, number 4, we want to exhilarate you with a chance to get your eyes on those treasures I've talked about and to enjoy some incredible fellowship and food and music outside, out in the patio space. So how does that sound like a program? It'll be a good night. We're going to have a great time. So this evening, we are privileged to have with us 2 extraordinary guests to help us think through this theme of the pursuit of unity in a divided world. Dr. Michael Oren is a distinguished diplomat, scholar, writer, and politician with a life way too colorful and impactful for me to do justice to. Though we've given you a description of some interesting points about him in the program that you have today. Educated and subsequently a professor at some of the finest universities in the world, Dr. Oren's wise and winsome voice has been heard in so many different contexts of our culture. In government, in the journalistic sphere. He's been quoted and sought after so often by various leadership organizations. He has been a featured speaker and voice in all of the major newspapers, on many of the major television programs here in the U.S. and abroad as well. He has served with distinction in the Israeli military. He is for 4 years, was the ambassador to the United States from the state of Israel. He has been active as a member and as a minister of the Knesset, Israel's legislature. There's just almost no sphere of life that this man has not engaged with and made a difference in. And I learned today that in addition to all this, he's a gold medal winning oarsman. I was a rower in college too. He's a filmmaker, and I'd love to know more about that experience. And he is the very proud father of 3 and grandfather of 6 grandchildren. So we'll have a chance to hear from Ambassador Oren tonight, and that's going to be a great privilege. Our second panelist is Dr. Oswald Oz Guiness, who is, as many of you will already know, an English author, a theologian, and a wonderful social and cultural critic. He, too, brings a sparkling resume that you can read about in your program tonight. Dr. Guiness is a descendant of the famous Dublin Brewing Company. And sadly, he brought no samples for any of us here tonight. But what he will bring to us, I know from experience with him, is wit and wisdom and tremendous perspective on these tumultuous times in which all of us are living. Dr. Guinness's insight is born of an education at the University of London and at Oriel College, Oxford University, through fellowships at some of the most respected think tanks on the subject of politics, international studies, and cultural affairs, and the Christian faith throughout the world. And his extensive personal scholarship, his relentless passion to know more and understand it and then share it with other people has led it to his authoring almost 30 different books. Remarkable ones, many of which I've had the privilege of getting to know. One of those books is entitled The Magna Carta of Humanity, Sinai's Revolutionary Faith and the Future of Freedom, in which he charts the essential common ground for Jews and Christians and points to the mission we must have to pursue liberty, freedom, hope, and flourishing for the world. I hope we'll have a chance to hear his thoughts on that. After a little while, I'm going to pose a set of questions to our panelists and invite you just to listen in to their reflections on a variety of interesting topics. But we want you to know that we are eager to have your questions figure into the conversation tonight. And for that reason, we put into the pews in front of you or on your seat little white cards. There are pencils in the pew racks. Feel free to grab one of those, jot down a question that may occur to you over the course of this evening, and then a little later on in the program, after we've had an initial conversation here, we will ask you to take those cards, send them to the nearest aisle, we'll collect them up, and we'll try and answer as many of those questions as we possibly have time for. At this time, I know you're waiting to hear from our guests. Will you join me in welcoming Ambassador Oren and Dr. Guinness to the platform of the chapel?
You're in the middle. There, I'm in the middle. The central.
Well, gentlemen, we are so pleased to share this night with you. Thanks for traveling all the way to this remote part of the planet. And give us a little sense of where you've just come from and what it feels like to be here at Ocean Reef once more.
I had the privilege of an extraordinary week with Peter Thiel discussing the Antichrist in Austria. I've just literally come from New York, though, with the Tikva Foundation discussing the bipolar anti-Semitism. Very serious weekend.
Well, first of all, delightful to be back. Hello, everyone, again. You remind me I should never speak after a pastor. That's very daunting. And thank you for that glowing introduction. My friend, some of you may know the writer Yossi Klein Halevi, my best friend. He calls me the Forrest Gump of the Jewish people. So you're just saying too many things. So delightful to be back. Michael, Weiss, my brother, Gary Freeman, and my son, of course, Yoav. Thank you. I flew into Israel sometime this week. I don't quite remember when. Flew immediately to Phoenix. This year, I have the honor to be the ambassador for the Technion. For those of you who don't know, Technion is Israel's MIT. Technion is all in your life. You open up a computer, Technion made it. You send a text message, Technion made it. And in many areas, pharmaceuticals and medicines, everywhere is Technion. And I'm delighted to be able to do that. From there, if memory serves, he came back and went to a basketball game. The Nets played the Celtics last night. That's enough said.
Yeah.
But it was a very special evening because the owners of the Nets are very much involved with Israel, and they brought 3 recently freed hostages from the tunnels of Gaza.
Wow.
Together with about 20 wounded IDF soldiers who were there and were able to be with them and to enjoy the game with them and to dance with them and sing with them, and it was an extraordinary experience. And from then, that was this morning, and I flew here, so it's been quite a week.
Well, both of you gentlemen have lived the range of life in a way that has given you no small amount of experience and understanding of the world that we're living in today. And I would say that in the conversations that I have with friends and family members and other associates, one of the most frequent themes I hear in the conversations is their observation that we're living in an unusually divided time. That it's very difficult to talk about important topics because people so quickly flash in anger, are triggered by certain catchphrases. And the observation so many people make is that it feels like unprecedented levels of polarization, division, and conflict. Some people say, I'm afraid of going to the Thanksgiving dinner table for what we may end up talking about and what may happen there in the conversation. So my question for you, just to get us going, is what is feeding this? And how do you look at the times we're living with? Can you respond to that?
Yeah, I started last time.
Okay. You know, historically, I'm an historian by training. And there's a school of thought, those of you who may be familiar with the Harvard professor, Steve Pinsker, who says these are actually the best of times. Humanity's never had it so good. And if you look at certainly previous centuries, the normal state of relations between states was a state of war. All states were in a state of war. Tribes were in a state of war. Native American tribes were naturally in a state of war. And yes, we've just now been living in a country at war for the last 2 years. There's a terrible war going on in the Ukraine. But compared to previous centuries, this is a halcyon period. But why then can we say in the same breath that we're afraid of going to Thanksgiving? And I'm, for the record, terrified of going to Thanksgiving. And the answer is the polarization is on a personal level. It's not necessarily on a national level. It's that we've grown insular. We've drawn into ourselves. Now, of course, social media has a tremendous role to play in this. And we go on social media and we go into these bubbles that reinforce our feelings, our prejudice, our points of view, and shut out anybody else's points of view. And this has been endemic. And this is not just an endemic, I would say it's a pandemic of humanity. And it affects not just our relationships around the Thanksgiving table. It affects relationships between couples. We have a generation now, not necessarily represented in this room, but they don't have a social life. They don't go out. They don't talk to one another. And it's going to have a profound, profound impact on the future of our civilization, even on the most mundane level, which is demographic. People are not getting married. People are not having children. And why have children? Having a child is an affirmation of the meaning of life and what we have in common with one another. And if you don't have that, why bother to deal with these horrible kids, right, Yoav? God, I had to raise this child. It's such hard. We know it's not easy being a parent, but that's the only reason. And I just say, just parenthetically, and I'll stop here, and we'll go on to this later, there's a reason why the state of Israel, alone among the developed countries of the world, has a positive birth rate, and a very positive birth rate. All other developed countries in the world today have a negative birth rate.
Thank you. I will be intrigued to follow up on that. Oz, how do you look at the times we're in right now?
Well, I agree with the challenge you're putting. Everyone's aware of the polarization. I think people don't think deeply enough. And I would just mention two factors. One, we're at what historians call a civilizational moment. In other words, the civilization loses touch with its inspiration. And unless there's a replacement of it, there has to be either a renewal, replacement, or decline. And the West is the creation of the Christian faith rooted in Judaism, but they're rejected. And so you have this profound calling into question of the West. Now you look at America, I think the polarization is slightly different. The deepest one is an ideological one. Those who understand the Republic and freedom from the perspective of the American Revolution, largely rooted in the Torah. And those who understand America today with ideas that come down from the French Revolution. So we're as deeply divided as Lincoln says, house divided cannot stand. It can't be half slave, half free. America cannot be half 1776 and half 1789. And that's incredibly important. And some leader, like a Moses or a Lincoln, has to say, America, choose. The polarization is very real. You could add other ones. Those, to me, are the deepest.
Inflection point that not many people paid much attention to, but I bet you did. Maybe 15, 17 years ago, the European Union was asked whether Christianity should be a source of European identity. Get this. And the EU turned it down. They threw out the window 2,000 years of Christendom. And what were they left with? Progress, modernity, right? Liberalism, these neologisms.
But that was the same sort of thinking as Steven Pinker. In other words, enlightenment, optimism, and it's generally seen to have failed now.
Because it's left, because these terms are empty. And you know, we are deracinated. We're cut off from the roots of our past. And what's left? And the answer is not very much.
So finding common ground, finding shared moral foundations and a vision for human flourishing has been for Jewish and Christian people a preoccupation that has driven them to studying the scriptures. It's been out of the Bible that people have gotten a picture of a worldview that is worth living for and fighting for. We're going to talk about the Bible tonight, as it's an important part of what unifies the congregations here at the chapel. But we'd love to be more personal with the two of you about this and just say, tell us a little bit about your own experience of the scriptures and why they've been important to you personally.
Well, I've been a Christian, a follower of Jesus for 70 years now. And I love reading the scriptures every day. And every time I read them, and I've read through them many, many times, there's always something new, striking, that challenges me deeply. But for me, at the present moment, the danger is people thinking of this just spiritual devotional. Because America's coming to its 250th. And many people don't realize the ways in which the American experiment is rooted in Judaism. Because in the Reformation, with the notion of back to the Bible, they started to look around. And the Christian Hebrews, so-called, pointed out that the biblical way of politics was not hierarchical. It wasn't monarchy and the other things. It was covenantal. And that notion is critical to America. And you could spell it out in 9 or 10 ways. People need to understand that. So the president talks, make America great again. And Joe Biden used to talk about restoring the soul of America. Neither of them said what the soul of America was or what made America in the first place. And it's actually ideas from the Bible. So I love the scriptures, both the Old Testament and the New. But it's also profoundly important for the nation this next year. And unless there's a returning, America has drifted from its roots. And unless there's a returning, the Republic is in trouble.
If you had to identify for yourself, Dr. Guiness, one or two of the ideas you find in the Bible that you think are most needful of recovering or worth our studying, what kicks up for you?
Well, the most obvious thing is Exodus, for example, is the master narrative of freedom. But it's also the beginning of a sustained critique of the abuse of power. The global menace today is power. Following Nietzsche, God is dead. We want to revalue all values. How does he describe the last words of Nietzsche? You want a name for my world? This is the will to power and nothing else besides. That's authoritarianism, totalitarianism. And there are many in the West now following Nietzsche, Machiavelli, that whatever it takes, pure power. The framers, separation of powers, many other things. The Bible teaches us the danger of power. And we've got to know what its limits in all sorts of ways. That's incredibly practical.
Wow, love it, love it. How about your experience, Ambassador? We talked briefly ahead of time about a journey you've been on. Tell us about your encounter with the scriptures.
So I was born Jewish, but I didn't know very much. My family wasn't very religious. I couldn't have told you what kosher food was. I couldn't have told you what the Talmud was, much less have read the Torah. When I was about 15, I woke up one morning and said, wow, I'm Jewish. I better figure out what that means. Went and found a rabbi who taught me. And I'm deeply indebted to him. Those of you know, we wear phylacteries in the morning to fill in. I still have the phylacteries that he gave me when I was 15. But it didn't stop there. I was on a spiritual journey. And down the street, Gary, remember the Baptist church on the corner of Pleasant Valley Way? No, that was different, a different church, Danny Hogan's father. That church actually became an Orthodox synagogue, the craziest thing. But on the corner where the bank is, PNC Bank is, there was a Baptist church. I went and knocked on the door there. Pastor Miller, who was tall and charismatic and, of course, eloquent. I think you guys are all the same. I don't know what it is. You're like a mole. I don't know what it is. And what do they teach you in seminary, really? And I said to him, a little thing called chutzpah. I said, Pastor, look, I really want to learn the New Testament. Can you teach me the New Testament without trying to proselytize me? And he was great. And for that whole year, we sat and studied in a Talmudic way, studied the New Testament. And I discovered something extraordinary in this book, that basically this is a Jewish book. And reading the New Testament as a Jew is a completely different experience. And to the degree that, you read the Lord's Prayer. Our Father art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You hear the Hebrew behind you. Avi b'shamayim, kadosh shimcha. It's a Hebrew prayer. Totally Hebrew prayer. Yeah. And that made me realize that, when we talk about a Judeo-Christian ethic, we talk about a common civilization. There it was, like staring at me at the page. And it later on became important in my life. I became an advisor to Yitzhak Rabin. My first political job was as advisor for church affairs in the state of Israel, and later as someone who remains very much involved in Jewish-Christian relations, and I'm proud to be a board member of a wonderful organization called Passages.
Okay.
Do you know Passages?
I do not.
Passages is Christian birthright for young Christians to come to Israel for a 10-day trip and learn about our common civilization. It's a great organization. Plug.
A shameless but good plug. Good plug.
Okay.
Yes. Why does it feel so important for Jews and Christians to know about each other, build relationships in the world today? There are lots of places that anyone could go within their own tribe or somebody else's tribe. Why is that particular pairing significant?
I would have to say, Dan, that much of the Christian treatment of the Jews is the worst stain on the history of the church in 2,000 years. Now, I'm personally very grateful to be a part of the Christian church, which since the Reformation, the Reformed community and the evangelical community for 400 years has longed for the restoration of the Jews to their land. Actually, they were Christian restorationists even before there were Jewish restorationists in that way.
The American colony of Tel Aviv, Jaffa, where there were two colonies in the 1850s and 1860s of people from New England, 50 years before Herzl, came to help the Jews create a Jewish state.
Yeah. My great-grandfather lived in the same building in Paris as Colonel Dreyfus.
Wow.
And he wrote 2 books, as I think you know, Dan, in the 19th century, on the fact that 1917 would be the key date for the restoration of the Jews to Israel. And my great-grandfather was one of those behind the Balfour Declaration. So,
remarkable.
There's been
in the 1890s?
1870s and 80s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Prophetic.
And General Allenby had read it.
Yeah.
Thought at first he couldn't make it to Jerusalem in 1917.
But he did.
But did.
He did. But he did.
And so on. Wow. But in other words, there is a large group of Christians who have a strong link with Israel, and we are standing firm today against the evil of anti-Semitism.
It is an evil, and it is one of the most pervasive and persistent evils. Somebody I heard recently said it's the oldest form of prejudice in the world.
Yeah.
What can Christians and Jews together do to bring that down, to turn it back, to change the chemistry of that really broken relationship in our world?
Well, it's not only the oldest prejudice in human history, it is the most multifaceted. So there's now in the United States, you have anti-Semitism of the left, and we've had anti-Semitism of the right. Jews are always the worst thing that anybody can talk about. So if you're a capitalist, you're a communist, Jews are communists. If you're a communist, Jews are capitalists. If you're an internationalist, the Jews are nationalists, and so it goes on. Right now, the worst thing we can be is racist and genocidal. They're always going to be the worst. And to understand that this is a pervasive hatred that is highly protein, is changing its shape all the time, sometimes faster than we can ever deal with it. Now, why this is, are very deep roots. There's some excellent books about why anti-Semitism. I think my own personal feeling is that the Jews came up with this extraordinary notion, not just of God, but of universal morality. We hold up a mirror to civilization, and nobody will ever forgive us for it. Seriously, it's a real problem, that creating universal morality, good and evil. And what we can do about it is twofold. One, we can fight, and we've learned to fight, certainly during the course of this war. We found that fighting anti-Semitism in a fight led by non-Jews in Congress resulted in the resignation of the president of Harvard and the president of the University of Pennsylvania. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? You can fight in the Churchillian way. You can fight in the classroom. You can fight in the courtroom. You can fight certainly in the TV studio. But the greatest tool in the fight against anti-Semitism is simply education. Educating people about Jewish history, about the common history we have with Christians. I'm engaged in with an initiative with Pepperdine University and the National Endowment of the Humanities to promote courses on Jewish history for Christian Bible colleges throughout the United States, so that people know who are these people, who are this small, obscure nomadic tribe in the ancient Middle East that came up with these extraordinary notions that have shaped humanity over and over and over again. And that's crucial. It's so basic. You think, how come nobody ever thought of this before? Yeah. And it's great. We're having tremendous support from the National Endowment, and also, I must say, from the Trump administration. It's a good, interesting Freudian slip from the Trump administration.
Oz, would you add to that? Any thoughts in terms of, as Christians, what can we be much more active in doing?
No, I agree thoroughly with Michael on education, but I would just add the element of education and persuasion. In other words, take, say, the Jewish roots of the American experiment. What you see with the Red-Green Alliance, the radical Marxism, the radical Islamism, is not only profoundly evil and anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish, anti-American, anti-Western, it's stupid. Yeah. It's monumentally stupid. Why? Because those roots are the deepest roots of freedom and justice and human dignity the world has ever seen. And if you rule that out, where do we go? So that's the way I argue. In other words, it's take, say, next year again. There's an initiative on the day of prayer next year, May the 7th, congressionally approved, to have a national rededication where there'll be thanksgiving for all the greatness. There'll be confession, Lincoln style or Daniel style, for where America has not lived up to its standards, and then rededication. But people need to know what those first principles were, and the Tikva Foundation is taking the lead in producing a curriculum, not just for Jews, but for all the American citizens, schools, colleges, universities, churches.
Also, that really, National Endowment, it's the same fund.
The same thing.
They're great. They're doing wonderful work.
Bringing back those first. Hardly anyone knows about them.
Right.
As you know, I'm not American. I'm an admirer of this country. But I'm always amazed how many Americans don't know what made America in the first place.
That the Pilgrims knew Hebrew. They gave 1,000 Hebrew names to the East Coast, certainly.
Yeah.
All those Bethlehems and Zions. My favorite one is where Biden has his summer house, which is in Rehoboth Beach. I love that. I live near Rehoboth in Israel. But that Thanksgiving, right? The Pilgrims spoke Hebrew. And what did they eat on Thanksgiving? They ate turkey. The word for turkey in Hebrew is hodu, right? Which also means thanks.
Oh, wow. There's a factoid to share.
They knew that. They knew what they were doing.
Winthrop was called the American Nehemiah, with his vision of what he was trying to do. John Adams says that the Hebrews have done more to civilize humanity than any other race on the earth. And in a funny way, you could say the Jews have invented many, many things, from a humble biro and Bic and things like pens right up to the atom bomb. But the greatest invention of the Jews is actually America, in a funny way. Wow. Did you realize
the fundamental notion of the Constitution, and I know you'll agree with this, is that there is no freedom without law.
Ordered
True, and
freedom.
that's the message of Exodus.
Yeah.
The difference between going out of Egypt and Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
You get freedom, but you can't have complete freedom, because free freedom is, without laws is anarchy. And just having law is tyranny.
Yep.
And it's that balance which is hardwired by the founding fathers into the Constitution. Checks and balances.
That's covenantalism, ordered freedom.
Wow. There may be some follow-up questions about that, so be writing and what your questions are. We'll give you a chance to speak in just a minute. So what is it that we would benefit knowing about the land, this strip of land along the Mediterranean that has been the focus of the camera of the world, has been a place of so many significant religions? What do we need to know about the land as a people in order to be able to respond creatively to all of the conflicts that are happening there right now?
Go ahead.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, that's your world.
As I said, I live in Jaffa, best known to the place where the whale, not actually a whale, a big fish, swallowed Jonah. And you have the big apple, you have the big orange, but our symbol in Jaffa is the big fish. They're all over the place, they proliferate. And I will take someone, I'll say, you see that parking lot down the street? That parking lot is fundamentally, spiritually different than any other parking lot on the planet Earth. Because that parking lot is holy to half of humanity. Now, once you get into that mindset, we're dealing with a land that is holy to half of humanity. And to understand the connection between my people, the Jewish people, and that land, because we talk about covenant. And in many ways, the glue of the covenant is that land. God says to Abraham, I'm going to give you a land. Take yourself to that land. And so Abraham's decision to cross over the river, and he becomes a Hebrew. The word Hebrew, the word for crossing over in Hebrew is ivri, the person who crosses over. And he goes to that land. So this is a 4,000-year connection between us and that land. How else can you explain how a people who, after 2,000 years of exile, of expulsions and massacres and prejudice, after the largest single slaughter in human history, in which 1 out of every 3 Jews are killed in the world during the Holocaust, almost 3 years after the date at the end of the Holocaust. The Holocaust ends on May 8th, 1945. The State of Israel comes into being on May 14th, 1948. That's the connection to the land. And the connection to the land is absolutely indivisible and inseparable from faith. It's what faith is about. Who has that type of strength to do that? And we've been independent for 77 years, but we've never known a moment of peace. We've gone from war to war to war. And it's the connection to the land and the connection of the land to faith. It's those 3 things, peoplehood, faith, and land, that is the secret of our survival, is the secret of our success, is the secret of our strength to this very day. If I can get that across, I've done my job.
There is so, you want to add to that?
No, I was just going to add that Winston Churchill always used to quote Benjamin Disraeli, our Jewish prime minister in the 19th century, who kept saying, based on Genesis and that passage, the Lord deals with the nations as the nations deal with the Jews. And there's a warning in that, too, that Churchill often used to remind people.
It's empirically true, too, by the way.
One of the most beautiful aspects to the Judeo-Christian tradition, for me personally, is this vision of being a people with a mission, of not being a people only for self, but a people for others. And the identity and the calling of Israel as ones who bear a light to the nations, for the nations, that is the nation through which all nations will be blessed on earth, is such an incredibly beautiful thing. And one of the things I worry about in our own country sometimes, in the U.S., is that that vision of being a people who had something to do in the world that would bring good to others can begin to flag. How, as you look today at Israel, are you seeing that passion for being a blessing to others lived out in relationship to Palestinians, to others in the region, to even people on other sides of the planet?
We talked earlier about the meaning of Scripture for me.
Yeah.
And when I read Scripture, during the Jewish year, we read a section of the Torah every week. There are lines that I read them today, and they literally take my breath away. Justice, justice you shall pursue. The Lord is near to all who call upon him, in truth. These are words that were written 2,700, 2,800 years ago. That notion that you approach a God, God will be accessible if you call with truth. These notions of pursuing justice, of pursuing truth, are hardwired into the Israeli experience. I know you're going to see on CNN, you're going to read in the New York Times how we wake up in the morning and all we think about is how we're going to kill the next Palestinian child. Right? And there's, by the way, the deep anti-Semitic tropes in there, because in the Middle Ages, Jews killed children. But the fact of the matter is that these notions guide us daily through immensely unspeakable complex situations. Just Gaza, for example, where you have 30,000 terrorists embedded in 2.2 million people, and beneath them 500 kilometers of tunnels. No army in history, remotely, has ever encountered anything like that, remotely. And somehow you have to minimize casualties where the world is condemning you. Now, we are a very powerful army. The Israeli army is more than twice the size of the British and French armies combined. We lost 1,200 people, massacred on October 7th. 1,200 people, in American terms, would be 44,000 people. Can you imagine losing 44,000 people in 7 hours in this country, and what the United States would do to a neighboring enemy country that sought us destruction? You would flatten it. You would flatten it. We did not use our power to flatten Gaza. We did not. We went in there on foot and we fought house to house, and every house was an arsenal, a tunnel, a sniper's nest. And we had no choice sometimes to blow up these buildings, and we get condemned for that too. It's that faith. It's that connection. It's not because there are young Israelis who say, why do we bother taking these risks? They're accusing us of genocide. Well, let's just do it anyway. And the reason we don't do it is not because of the New York Times and CNN. The reason we do it is because who we are, because our faith, our Scripture, is telling us what we have to do. And it's painful. It's excruciating. They'll say there's 66,000 Palestinians we've killed, okay? But we know we've killed 25,000 terrorists, so deduct that from the 66. We know that thousands of Palestinians are killed by Palestinian rockets that fall short. 20% of the rockets fall short. And we know that of a population of 2.2 million over the course of 2 years, about 6,000 people die of natural causes. You deduct that, and you've got a 1-to-1 combatant to civilian casualty rate. Okay? Every Palestinian casualty is a tragedy. But no army in history has come close to that. The United States, when it fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, at very least it was 9 civilians killed for every combatant. At most it was 26 civilians killed for every combatant. So this is an army which is proving daily, at a great cost, by the way, this costs us lives, that we adhere to these principles that are in our Scripture. And I think in that there's a tremendous lesson for the entire world, and certainly for our friends in the West.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. We are very eager to hear what's percolating for you in the pews, and so at this time I want to invite you, if you have jotted down a question, send it out to one of the aisles, preferably these 3 aisles, if you could, and our ushers will come forward and collect those, and we'll try and entertain some of those questions in the time we have remaining here. As that is happening, gentlemen, I'm just going to shamelessly ask you for counsel and ask that if you had to advise the chapel at Ocean Reef on some practices that could build a deeper connection across divisions, and doesn't have to just be Jewish and Christian, it can be any kind of division. What are some of the critical practices that you would commend for us to be trying to seek personally?
Us?
Could I broaden it, Dan?
You may.
Because Ocean Reef has incredible influence across the nation.
Yeah.
And I would say next year is a critical year for the Republic. The month before Lincoln issued the Proclamation of Emancipation, he wrote the famous letter to the Congress calling America the last best hope of Earth. And I think you could say, humanly speaking, God may have other ideas. Humanly speaking, next year is providential. It could be the last best chance for the last best hope. In the sense, the Republic has drifted enormously. You have forces now on the radical left which are gaslighting the whole American experiment. Unless there's a return to the fundamental first principles, the Republic is in deep trouble. And very few people are addressing it because very few people really understand the fundamental first principles, and certainly how they come from Judaism. So next year is a providential moment, and I hope the leadership in Ocean Reef, as it scatters out across the nation, will challenge people to reflect, to think deeply. There'll be fireworks and there'll be flyovers, and the president will doubtless make it a big, beautiful celebration. But if it's only that, you'll miss the moment. Because the American experiment is the only counter in the West to this global menace of authoritarianism. And unless you recapture what you were and need to be again, next year will be wasted. So that would be my challenge.
Dr. Guinness's Magna Carta of Humanity book would be a terrific read for any of us. And
well, actually, if you're interested, my new book came out a couple of weeks ago.
even better.
I've written 4 since then, Dan.
Please do.
It's called America Agonistes on America 250.
Okay.
And there's a chapter called The Gift of the Jews. And we need to understand what we owe to them.
And we have Dr. Guinness returning to speak here at the chapel at the Protestant Congregation service in March, I believe it is. It's coming.
I think so, yeah.
So we'll keep you posted. What kicks up for you, Ambassador, on that question?
But we were talking before in the back, and I was mentioning this extraordinary book I just read called Against the Machine by Paul Kingsnorth. I strongly recommend. This was a transformative book for me. And he's a religious Christian. He's an Anglo-Irish gentleman who lives up in, he's a bit of a Luddite. But he talks about why the West has died. He actually makes a case that the West is dead, doesn't even know it's dead yet. And the West has died because it has lost the 4 Ps, right? It has lost place, peoplehood, prayer, and the past. We're cut off from our past. We're cut off from our faith. We're cut off from our peoplehood, a sense of peoplehood. We're cut off. So my recommendation, this is a humble one, is to come to the state of Israel. Because what you're going to find in the state of Israel is a people who defy Paul Kingsnorth's notion that technology has been responsible for the eradication of these 4 Ps. We are one of the world's leading technological superpowers. All right? We're a high-tech nation. And yet we have prayer. You should come to my community and see a rooted prayer community. You should see the peoplehood that we have, strong peoplehood. We are deeply connected to our past.
Yeah.
You should just come to my synagogue, and a little bit different than this place, but a lot of people are doing reserve duty, and they're up praying with rifles on their backs, people with 10 kids. And what you're going to see, I believe, is a solution to the malaise of the West, that it is possible to reconcile modernity with tradition, East and West, democracy with a country that is willing to defend itself. In this last war, 400,000 Israelis picked up a gun, left their homes, left their families to go out and fight, and they knew there was a chance they weren't coming back. We met these wounded soldiers last night. 70,000 wounded soldiers. 400,000 Israelis is the numerical equivalent of about 22 million Americans. That's 8 million Americans more than fought in all of World War II. There is an example of how a country that believes in itself, that prays, that's rooted in its place, and in its place in the land of Israel, can offer a solution to the great challenges facing the United States and the West.
Dan, could I add one thing?
You may. That's why we have you here.
That book leaves people a little pessimistic. But I think
Agonistes one.
No, not mine. I'm a person of hope.
Yes.
And for a simple, Paul's book,
It was despondent.
Yeah.
Oh, totally despondent.
I think one of the great, if you look at all the books about the decline of the West, decline leads to fall, and certainly in the atheist secularist position, they're ironclad.
Yes.
The wonderful thing about the Bible, and you see it in your heritage, the pairing is not decline and fall, it's exile and return.
Yeah.
And if you have repentance, a turning point, the freedom to repent, the Lord says from Moses right through to Malachi, if you return to me, I will return to you and restore your fortunes. And You know, the great Catholic apologist G.K. Chesterton put it well in Christian terms. He said, 6 times the church has gone to the dogs, but in each case, it was the dog that died. In other words, restoration,
That's
Jews
great.
and Christians believe in renewal.
So true.
Wow.
So true.
One of the questions that came up was to Dr. Oz was to explain the difference between following the example of 1776 and the example of 1789. You want to unpack that for everybody?
Well, there are all sorts of differences. You take the beginning. 1776 basically starts from the Bible. 1789 starts from the French Enlightenment, Rousseau and so on. They have fundamentally different views of humanity. So the biblical view is realistic. The Bible never airbrushes its leaders. So you have checks and balances. Why? To counter ambition and so on. You see it in Madison, coming from Witherspoon, coming from the Scottish Reformation. The French Revolution, utopian. And whenever you have a gap between reality and hopes, it's always filled with coercion and violence. And you go on down the line. Currently, the big difference is justice. The radical left fights injustice. To their credit, there is injustice. But what they do is set up a conflict of powers, and as the Roman put it, the only possible answer is the peace of despotism. The state takes over. There's no violence because you have absolute authoritarianism. That's the end of the radical left. Within the biblical framework, you have a prophetic address to the abuse of power, but you call for repentance and about turn and confession and forgiveness and reconciliation. And as Lincoln says, enemies can be made friends.
Wow. Wow. Good stuff. Ambassador, this was, I think, to you, and although we welcome Dr. Guinness's reflections too, is a two-state solution realistic given Muslim intolerance of any state of Israel?
No. How about that? Can I stop with that?
Yeah.
Listen, I have been involved in the peace process going back to Yitzhak Rabin in the early 90s. And I participated in the last round of negotiations with the Palestinians. I was an advisor on the Trump peace plan, the deal of the century. So I have a long experience with this. And there are 3 reasons why this Palestinian state is not going to happen. One is they don't want it. Someone's not getting the memo. The Palestinians hold the world record for people who have been offered a state but have turned it down in 1937, 1948, right? 2000, 2001, 2008. They don't just turn it down, they turn it down with mass violence that kills thousands of people. So someone's not getting the memo out there. Second reason is, if they even got a state, would it hold together? And there's not a shred of evidence that would indicate that they would actually hold together. The Palestinian national movement has fragmented over and over again. Even when Hamas was in Gaza, it began to fragment into different terrorist groups. The leadership in Judea and Samaria, we call the West Bank, Mahmoud Abbas is in the 19th year of his 4-year term. He's despised. He's divided by the Palestinians. He won't stand for re-election because he knows he's going to lose. Thoroughly corrupt. And the third reason is, well, October 7th. Anybody who thinks that a new Palestinian state is going to treat us any differently than the last Palestinian state, and that's what Gaza was. It was a Palestinian state. We withdrew from Gaza in 2005. Every last Jew got out of Gaza. We gave it to them as a state, and they turned it into a terrorist state that fired tens of thousands of rockets at us, and ultimately the largest massacres of Jews since the Holocaust. Today, according to polls, you're not going to believe this, Don, the majority of Palestinians still support Hamas, and the majority of Palestinians, even in Gaza, think October 7th was a great idea. You want to give them a state? So I live in Jaffa, I live in southern Tel Aviv. Through my rear view mirror, from my balcony, I see the Mediterranean, but from my rear windows, I see the Hebron Hills, where that state would be. You give them a state, my house is not going to be in rocket range. It's going to be in rifle range. It's going to be rifle range. So the answer is no. That doesn't mean we can't explore other alternatives. For example, I like the Swiss model, the cantonment model. You can expand autonomy in the West Bank. There's many things you can do. But the two-state solution is actually a tragedy for the Palestinians, because it's never going to happen. And the majority of Israelis don't want it today either. So let's open our minds and think about different ways we can move to make a situation which is highly, highly complex, more stable, and ultimately peaceful.
I agree with you totally. Are you willing to say a little outline of what your desired approach would be?
So I wrote an article once for the Wall Street Journal called The Two-State Reality. So those of you who've been to Israel, we have a big highway that goes up Highway 6 that cuts the old border, 67 border between what is Israel pre-67 and Judea and Samaria. You look to your right, there's big Palestinian cities. They got a city called Tulkarm, a city called Kalkilia. They got big Palestinian flags flying over. What does it mean? There actually is a state there. We have a two-state reality. It's a state that is not a Weberian state. It doesn't have full sovereignty, but it has a government. It can hold elections if it wants to. It doesn't. They have a military force, guys with guns. They collect taxes, mostly at gunpoint. And they are kind of a state. We can expand that. We can expand that. We can make it more autonomous. We can give them, more territory to expand. There's many ways we can do it. It's not a state. It's not a state that can make it pact with Iran and have the Iranian army on our border next day. And believe me, that's going to happen. Happen in Gaza. Now, you got to be pretty stupid / suicidal to think that you're going to get a different outcome now. And so we can do that. I like that cantonment notion. It's been published in the Wall Street Journal not so long ago, that you have a canton of Nablus, a canton of Hebron. They have independence, and they have a federated relationship with one another and a federated relationship with us. And it's based on family ties. It's not based on some, Palestinian nationalism, which has completely failed. Mm-hmm. Today, during the peace process, the word I would hear most often at the State Department was, everybody knows what the two-state solution looks like. Everybody knows what the future Palestinian state looks like. Guess what? Nobody knows. Nobody knows whether it's going to be a totalitarian state, a jihadist state, or both, likely to be both, because the old notion of a secular democratic state of Palestine went out the window. Nobody knows. So we have to look at different solutions. Mm-hmm. And they're out there, but they will not be out there as long as the world keeps knocking its head on this two-state notion, which has been failing now for 90 years.
Mm-hmm. All right. And there's more opportunity to talk about that. There are more questions about that, but I've set some of those aside so we can move to some different territory. We had 2 questions come in that have to do with how we help shepherd younger and rising generations to be able to engage in the kind of relationship building, convicted civil dialogue that could change the tide of polarization, that could move us toward at least some semblance of civility in a divided world, even if we're not all the way to unity. So I'm going to ask these 2 questions and then invite either or both of you to respond. One of the questions said, to say, thank you. You both emphasize the importance of education. Unfortunately, most youth are now getting their education, not so much in school or church, but via social media. How can we educate young Americans and re-inculcate a love of Judeo-Christian values if the children are all online? And if we try to educate them online, how do we do it in a way that does not simply immerse them in being online all the time? That's question number 1. Mm-hmm. Question number 2 was, can you comment on Charlie Kirk's assassination, and specifically, how important is it that the mission of organizations like Turning Point USA survive and thrive in order to help the world's young adults see a larger picture of conditions?
Well, let me mention one thing that's often ignored. I remember the first time I came here, I was in my 20s, 6 weeks crossing America, and one of my main impressions, contrasting with Europe, there was no supper table. The family dining table was like a Grand Prix pit stop, and people had to roar out to a violin lesson or soccer practice or something else, and it's like, whereas in Europe, I learned my family history always just by the family talking over the supper table. Yeah. And that's an incredibly important part of this that's often forgotten. Now, if you mention, I've been in Washington now 40 years and heard immigration discussed till the end of the day. Yeah. Hardly anyone mentions citizenship. Every new American through the public school, every new arrival from abroad should be integrated with American citizenship. It's not done. Yeah. So with that, the open border policy is literally suicidal. Without that, as Samuel Huntington said, it's easy to get your American papers, but who knows the American principles? So there's an incredible gap of citizenship education, and part of it is the crisis of the family dining table. Yeah.
That's good. I do recall, some of us in this room are old enough to recall, you took a course on civics in school, and that's largely been removed. I imagine civics.
Howard Zinn came in, and then the 1619 Project, and they're gaslighting America. America's xenophobic and imperialistic and all these nasty things.
That's great. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, many. It takes me back to earlier in the century when America was getting to intercede in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was very involved in this period with the Bush administration. And one of the points I stressed with them that the advice wasn't taken was that America has to get into the trenches. If you're going to fight Islamic extremism, you can't expect somebody else to do the fight. You have to get in there with literature, this was like pre-internet period, okay? But get in there and fight the fight of ideas. Now, I'm not making a comparison between Islamic extremism and jihadism and what's going on in the polarization of America, but it's the same principle. You can't expect any change to occur with youth who have been inundated with this type of polarizing, ostracizing, demonizing social media unless you get into the trenches. So where is the counter? Where's the counter-revolution? Where is the national or international initiative to get into the trenches of social media and educate young people about the Judeo-Christian ethic and why their civilization is worth fighting for? And I haven't seen it yet, man. I really haven't.
Yeah.
It's not there. It's like a no-show. And what do we expect? Because they're not only getting it in their social media, they're also getting it on most of their campuses. Most of the campuses are reinforcing this, unfortunately. But now we have some great campuses, the University of Austin, right? Barry Weiss's campus, University of Texas, some great places. And here in Florida, University of Miami, Gainesville, great campuses where these ideas are not taking hold. They're fighting back. So you can fight. That was what I said earlier, in the Churchillian sense. You got to fight in the courtroom, you got to fight in the classroom, but you got to also fight on the screen.
One of the questioners said, we're doing a good job of explaining Judaism in a deeper way to Christians. In light of centuries of persecution, how do we explain Christianity to Jewish people?
Okay, I'm going to take that one. I like that one. I would have quoted a student of mine. There's a line in the Talmud that says, from all my students, I've grown wise. So I got wise from this student. He said to me, I understand something now, Professor. He said, in the past, Jews suffered from too much Christianity. And now we're suffering from not enough Christianity. I thought was an interesting line. All right? And he was absolutely right. And I think what Jews have to understand about Christians and Christian faith is, first of all, it comes out of the same wellspring. It's what I talked about my experience when I read the New Testament for the first time, and the impact it had on me. That I was reading a Jewish book that read just certain different conclusions about the way we should worship God. Okay, but we're still talking about the same values. As far as I know, there's not a value in the New Testament that doesn't appear in the Old Testament. What you call the Old Testament the Torah, and it is a civilization. It is a very unique and precious view of reality and how we're to do this. And to understand Jews, because the natural reaction, I was in Knesset for years. You're not going to believe this, but there is a mosque in the Knesset. There's a Knesset mosque. And about 6% of our population is Christian. And I said, well, why don't we have a Christmas tree in the Knesset? If you have a mosque, let's have a Christmas tree. And people look at me aghast. How can you say that? How can you do that? Because it has those type of associations, which are so visceral, very visceral associations. But we should definitely have a Christmas tree in the Knesset. I'll go on record saying that. Okay, I'm not running for office just now. But to understand that we come from the same place, and we speak in many ways in the same language, and we want the same things,
Yeah.
and we stand for the same things, and hopefully we're willing to fight for the same things, because the other people know what they believe, and they are willing to fight, and they are willing to die.
Let me go further with
Jewish-Christian partnership is the key to a human-friendly future for humanity.
I like that.
That's a great call. So in light of both those observations, this next question is highly relevant. Where do the Muslims enter into the picture of Christians and Jews? What do we need to be thinking about as we try and understand these relationships?
I've been involved with interfaith efforts throughout the years. I have a very good friend who's an imam at a prominent American university. And we address this question. Sometimes it's very difficult. Judaism and Christianity have something very fundamental in common. Our normative religions were both founded during a period when neither Christians nor Jews had power. But Islam as a religion was founded in a period when the Muslims had power. And so power and political power become very much integrated in Islam. You can't have render what to Caesar is with Caesars in Islam, because Caesar is also the imam. And there's a big problem to get over that, because that's where jihadism comes from. That's where Islamism comes from. But what we have to do is get past that aspect of Islam that says that the New Testament and the Torah are corruptions. That's deeply ingrained in their theology. That they're kind of stories, but they're aberrations of the truth. And that we have to get past that. And my relationship with this imam, he has gotten past that. But that's what we have to strive for. And what can I say? It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy in Europe, and it's not going to be easy in New York.
Dr. Guiness, any thoughts on that?
I got you.
Slightly off your question, Dan, but I think the world issue is, will Islam modernize peacefully? And the key issue there is, will they accept religious freedom? Religious freedom of conscience for other people. And there's a huge difference. A very significant movement is Indonesia is the biggest Muslim nation in the world. They're non-Arab. The leaders in Indonesia now accept religious freedom for others. And they are actually sending missionaries to Europe to try and persuade their people against the jihadism. The problem is countries like Iran and other countries in the Arab world which don't accept freedom of conscience. Freedom of conscience is the issue. That makes possible a civil public square. Without that, you'll have endless conflict.
Yeah.
The Saudis are now redesigning their curriculum too, to provide for interfaith and tolerance. It can be done.
I think there is a genuine fear in so many parts of the world that strong political mobilization, gaining offices for Muslim office holders will lead the other direction, will lead to a suppression of religious freedoms in parts of every nation. Obviously, there's been a lot of anxiety about this in Europe, but even in places like Detroit here in the United States, what do we do about that? If there's an assertive strategy to gain that kind of a dominant political foothold with an end in mind to impose a different kind of understanding of law and freedom, what do we do about that?
Fight.
Yeah.
Fight. Listen, in Europe, you have these large populations that are not assimilating. They're not interested in being French. Not interested in being Dutch. I have a landlord who lives in Sweden, Malmo, Sweden, and he's a dentist. And his people come to me, he says, they don't speak Swedish, they only speak Arabic. And I say, why don't you learn Swedish? He says, no, someday you're going to learn Arabic. So hold on. And, that is what's occurring around Europe.
Yeah.
And, there are European movements now to wake up and fight back. And we will see. The civilization battle hangs in the balance. But I want to go back to what we talked earlier about having prayer and place and past and peoplehood. Europe's ability to win this battle against people who have the 4 Ps will be very difficult. The Dutch government is selling off 700 empty churches. Want to buy a cheap church? 700 churches, because the Dutch aren't going to church anymore. And you can't expect people to go out and fight on notions of progress and modernity. These are vapid terms. They're vapid terms.
It does.
But you're touching on another problem, which I put on it's a little controversial. If you take your lost 10 tribes, they were as lost to Judaism as people in the horror of the Holocaust. But they weren't exterminated. They just acculturated to Assyrian whatever. And we have in the church today large parts of the church that are acculturating themselves into oblivion. They've taken on the spirit of the age, and they've lost the distinctive parts of the faith. And I speak as an Englishman. Much of the Church of England is acculturating itself into oblivion. It's tragic.
I know.
When salt loses its saltiness. Yeah. Well, last question, and then we're going to shift gears for a moment, but this is a fascinating one. Is the year of Jubilee still observed in Israel?
Sure it is.
And how is it celebrated?
It's a Jubilee, but we have also the 7-year cycle of Jubilee where you can't pick fruit. Like human beings get a Sabbath, so too trees have a Sabbath and fields have a Sabbath. And if you go to an Israeli market, okay, people who observe certainly Jewish law, you'll have a stall that says, in this stall, we do not sell apples that were grown during the Jubilee year. And it's very much, and the Israeli army, which operates according to Jewish law, does not use produce that's grown in that 7th year.
This is America's 5th Jubilee, 250th.
Right. It'll be interesting what we celebrate and what that says about us in the 250th. Will we be celebrating the deep moral foundations, the spiritual vision that was the founding of the country, or will we celebrate our power, our prosperity? What will we see as the core of our identity and as the value system that gives us the best shot at flourishing in another 250 years?
And to understand that power comes from a place. It didn't come out, from nothing.
Yes. Amen.
Rabbi Sachs always says that the Jewish motto should be from Zechariah, not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord.
Yeah.
And it isn't power that is the first. America's a nation by intention and by ideas.
Yeah.
And
It is an idea.
What?
America is an idea.
Is an
It's an idea. And what we've learned in 1989, when the Soviet Union disappeared, that when people stop believing in an idea, the country disappears. I used to compare it to like Tinkerbell. If you don't believe in fairies, the fairies don't exist.
Yeah.
Okay? But keep in mind, an idea can disappear. It really can. Yov's grandfather, my father, landed on Normandy Beach. You remember my dad, great war hero. And I always have this fantasy of being in that, that landing craft he was in and sort of doing a poll. Where are you from? And why are you about to fight? Why are you about to land on this beach? And the poll would be, there'd be the farm kid from Alabama, and there'd be the medical school student from Harvard, and there'd be a business guy from the Bronx. And they'd all go around this boat, and the old paper would say the same thing. We're ready to go and fight for freedom. We're ready to go and fight against tyranny. You scoot ahead 80 years, and you go into that same boat. Well, you may still have the Alabama farm boy, but you're not going to have the Harvard medical student. You may not have the business guy from the Bronx. And you ask them, what are you willing to fight for? And what answers you're going to get? Okay? What are you willing to fight for? Do we have a common ideal?
Yeah.
And to me, that's what you have to get back to. You have to get back to my father's landing craft in June 1944, because that is, to me, the image of a country that knows what and who it is, what it stands for, and why it's worth defending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Many more conversations needed around tables about that topic. I'll put in a shameless plug myself for a little thing we're doing once a month over the next several months, and that is on Friday afternoons once a month. We're doing a lunch and learn, and it's a conversation that is sparked by Rabbi Ann Feibelman and myself on some of the big ideas, the crucial convictions that form a common base for Christians and for Jews that have implications for our family, for our country, for our society and world. And you would be warmly welcome to join us, bring a bag lunch and join us. You'll see publicity about that in the various communication organs. We would be happy to sit here all night and ask many more questions, but we want to honor the commitments we've made to all of you, and we have some very exciting stuff about to come up. Can I just invite all of us to express our gratitude to these two gentlemen?
Thank you. That was great. Okay. It was wonderful.
And as we prepare to go into what is going to be another really stimulating part of our evening program, I invite you to turn with me now and watch the screens.
When I think about throwing open the doors, there's several things that come to mind. I think the first thing is just the spirit of that. It's not open the doors. It's this idea of throwing them open. There's something about an energy, almost an avalanche of energy that is so welcoming that it can't just be, hello, glad you're here.
We exist to invite all people to engage with the transformative power of the Bible.
We do a really good job of presenting the Bible from all these different lenses, from a historical lens, from an impact lens, from a story lens, and so it meets the needs and the desires of people who want to see the Bible from all these different aspects.
It's funny because we just completed a culture survey recently, and it was the #1 thing that our internal staff pointed to is how welcoming they felt, which we hope we're conveying to everybody who walks in the door.
Anybody who embraces the Bible, there's a place for them here. The testimony is the fact that I'm here, because when I first came here, I said, you know, I'm a Jewish rabbi. This is basically a Christian organization. And they said, we want you to be an Orthodox Jewish rabbi without apology. This is why we're hiring you. That's who you are to be, and that's who we want you to be.
Do I belong here? Am I able to come in? Is it okay? Having people from South Korea and Singapore and Africa and Japan, New Zealand, Australia, every continent. And our answer is absolutely.
One day when I was at my desk, I had a gentleman walk up to me and his eyes were all watering. He was an Amish gentleman. And he was worried that the message that we had here would not translate to his community. He was so moved, and he said that what I saw here today is exactly what we teach. It's the same Bible we teach and show. And he said, and I learned so much about it.
One of the greatest things about this museum is the technology that we have here. Because what it says is, don't think of the Bible as being an ancient relic of the past.
It's really remarkable the way the museum can take someone back on a journey over 2,000 years ago, but then instantly say, my goodness, you're in a contemporary moment, and there is no gap.
You're able to experience the Bible through a technological immersive experience. You can experience it through the antiquities, through the evidence of the Bible, through archaeology, and how it's been passed down through history so well and so consistently.
I see it on the faces of the teenagers that come and visit, where they come in and they're thinking, oh no, what am I going to see? And as they leave, their faces are lit up and they're talking about the things that they saw in the Hebrew Bible experience or the videos or the interactives, and they start to connect with the Bible itself.
What ignited in us an understanding of Scripture that we may not have had before? What ignited in us this understanding that the God of the universe, who deigned to reach down and see me, loves me? You can tell that something's been ignited in my own soul, and I've seen it happen right here at the museum.
I am very passionate about the Bible. I'm very passionate about God, and I get to share that with the people that come in, and it's great.
So many people have said, you know, Carlos, I just get a feeling when I come to the museum. I just get this sentiment. It makes me feel so good that it's almost as though I'm home. And even as I leave, I carry it with me.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Weiss. I'm the vice chairman of our beautiful Ocean Reef Chapel and Fellowship Center. What do you think of the program so far? What do you think of the speakers? What do you think about the beautiful room and the beautiful settings? Has the chapel ever looked prettier than this? It's just amazing. And just think of me as your commentator. This is just the halftime show because we have lots more for you tonight. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to two very distinguished gentlemen, Dr. Aaron Ross and Dr. Anthony Schmidt. Aaron is the Chief Operating Officer of the Museum of the Bible, and Anthony runs the collections. The chief curator oversees the architectural preservation and the entire collections of priceless rare artifacts. artifacts that explore humanity, artifacts that tell us who we are and where we came from and what we believe in. The Museum of the Bible is one of the most peaceful, beautiful places on the planet. Tonight, I'm exceptionally pleased to say they are fulfilling a promise that was made to us when we opened our doors. We wanted to develop a building, a chapel that unified a community, 4 different faiths, all practicing religion in their way, in their own customs, in their own traditions. But how can 4 communities or 4 different groups not live together in harmony and unity? We partnered with what they did in Washington, D.C., and came up with what we believe was so important, a program of unity, faith, and community. But enough about what we tried to accomplish. Tonight, they're going to reveal rare religious, historical, and priceless artifacts that they had graciously given to the chapel, which will be on display permanently here, and also brought along with them other historical relevant artifacts for you to see tonight. So, after the conclusion of their talk, we'll say a couple of thank yous, and then we will open up the collection for the first time ever to be seen outside of the Museum of the Bible. With that, gentlemen, Aaron?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Weiss. I'm continuously blown away by just how amazing this chapel is, by the communities of this chapel, by the work of the board, of all of the ministers who have worked to make this happen, especially in unity. And I was really impressed by a phrase from the former ambassador when he talked about what is it going to do to fix the issue of unity. And he said one of the biggest issues is that we're cut off from our past. And I'm here to say, if you don't know much about the Museum of the Bible, there is a 430,000 square foot edifice to Scripture in the heart of Washington, D.C., to help people remember the past. We exist to invite people into a transformative, to engage with the transformative power of the Bible, the thing that we know that if people really could get inside of them would make a difference. And so that's what our museum does. It represents, from this video I think you just saw, such a beautiful reality about that bringing together people from different Christian and faith traditions. We have rabbis on staff. We have our director of exhibits is Jewish. And I myself, and I'm an Anglican priest, we in some ways look like this community does, coming together to engage with unity. And so we are so excited about what's coming to the Museum of the Bible. And we just wanted to give you a couple quick things to know about the museum and then talk about the items that we've brought here to show you. First, starting in just a few days, again, to help people remember the past, to understand this shared common experience that we have, opening in just 2-3 days, we'll be having the Dead Sea Scroll exhibit at the Museum of the Bible. We're going to be having 24 different fragments over 9 months displayed at the Museum of the Bible. It's going to be an incredible time. It's going to be from November to September of next year. In it, we've got some other amazing artifacts, things like the Magdala stone, which I wish I could tell you about, but I don't have time, so you just have to ask me afterwards, so that's fine, right? And then next year for the 250th, in light of the conversation that happened on this stage today, next year we're going to be having a series of speakers come to the Museum of the Bible to talk about how did the Bible, how did Hebrew Scripture, how did the Christian Bible, how did it influence the founding of America? So we're going to have scholars from Robbie George to Rabbi Sully who are going to come and actually teach people to remember again what it is that was the founding kind of document and guidance for the creation of America, right there in the heart of America, right? Next fall, we have icons that are coming for the first time ever, leaving Patmos. Greek Orthodox icons coming to be displayed outside of Patmos for the first time ever, right? It's such an exciting place to be, and we are so thrilled to have this partnership with the chapel at Ocean Reef about how do we help work together to build this unity that we keep talking about. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is pass it over now for the moment to Dr. Schmidt so he can talk about some of the items that we've brought that we have right out here for you to see after this.
Thank you, Aaron, and it's truly an honor to be here tonight. This is my first time here at Ocean Reef, and Aaron's been here before and told me wonderful things, and I can confirm that everything he said was true. So thank you for your hospitality, and thank you for your graciousness and kindness in inviting us here. It really is an honor. And we're really proud of this partnership that's growing with Ocean Reef, and we hope to see it grow and deepen in the coming years. So again, thank you, Michael, for having us. Start with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Can we go ahead and put some of the artifacts we brought up tonight? Next year is going to be very busy. Next year is going to be very busy, and we're going to kick things off actually this week with the opening of our Dead Sea Scrolls exhibition. As Aaron said, we are hosting 24 authentic Dead Sea Scroll fragments here at the museum. And what's interesting about these is that the Dead Sea Scrolls almost never leave Israel. These are so precious. They were discovered in the cave system around the area of Qumran and in 1947 and in the following years. And they shed a tremendous light on the transmission of the Bible, but also Jewish life in the Second Temple period. And this is going to overlap some with even the life of Jesus. And since their discovery, they've been instrumental for scholars, both Jewish and Christian, to understand better the history of the text and to produce even more accurate and better translations. And so, speaking of a shared history between Jews and Christians, the Dead Sea Scrolls and its discovery was just a tremendous moment. So we're honored to have them, and this is brought to the museum in partnership with the Israel Antiquities Authority, the governing body over all the artifacts that are found in Israel, and that relationship's just really blossomed since our opening. We're proud of that as well. So the object we brought tonight in the lower right corner, this is a facsimile that was created using the same methods and same materials as the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we can't travel with a scroll, but we brought the closest thing that you can have to a real authentic fragment here. And this is actually a fragment of Ecclesiastes. This is only 2 fragments in the thousands of fragments found in and around Qumran were Ecclesiastes, only 2, which is interesting. But the rest of the objects are going to speak to another important initiative that we have going on. Of course, as we heard our speakers mention tonight, this country has a big birthday coming up next year, 1776, the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We'll celebrate the 250th year of that next year. We're not alone in this, right? There's so many organizations across the United States and even across the Atlantic that will be commemorating and celebrating this moment. So what does the Museum of the Bible have to offer, right? What does the Museum of the Bible have to offer? But in some ways, what we're going to talk about in that exhibition is the fact that the American Revolution probably would have happened without the Bible, but it would have looked a lot different. The Bible was so ingrained and embedded in colonial life that it was inseparable. It was, of course, a religious text. Thousands of sermons were were preached throughout the colonies on any given Sunday. And thousands more pamphlets were published that these preachers would publish. They would publish their sermons, and they widely circulated throughout the 13 colonies. But it's also a civic text. So it became part of the vernacular in the colonies, right? The ideas, the themes, the symbols, the language of the Bible was a unifying force within the colonies, across these disparate 13 colonies. And so we're telling the story about that. How did it become a unifying force? And some of the metaphors that we heard mentioned tonight, the stories, so the Exodus story was extremely popular in the Revolutionary period. Same with the story of King David, his whole life, but specifically, David and Goliath, episodes like that you read in the Bible. So applying those stories to the situation in America, the British colonies at that time, really gave meaning to the conflict and helped motivate people and encourage people during a really, dark time. But it was also a political text. So, wide studies that have been done on political pamphlets, for example, that were published in the period. Who wants to guess what the most widely cited text in all the political pamphlets that were published in the colonial period? It's Deuteronomy, right? That was actually more than Montesquieu and some of these other Enlightenment thinkers. Twice as often, as frequently as John Locke. So that says quite a bit about how pervasive the Bible had become in the British colonies and what it would, the role it would play after the Revolution. Even founders that were pretty skeptical of organized religion in the Bible, such as Thomas Jefferson, knew the value that the Bible had as a civic text, as a unifying text. There's a great fear after the Revolution that the system that they created, this new republic, this American experiment, would fail. It would fail. That people would succumb to these baser desires. They would turn back to fighting and there'd be rivals between the colonies and political factions. And it was a deep fear that the United States wouldn't be able to hold itself together. It was such a large territory and it was expanding. So what could be a unifying factor in the United States without an established church, without formal institutions that were religious? The Bible would. So even Thomas Jefferson was advocating in his arguments for religious freedom, for religious liberty, for disestablishment, the role of the Bible as a way of creating moral citizens that could sustain a republic. And so that sense of a unifying text in American culture was pervasive in the early 1800s. And so some of the objects we bring tonight, let's see, I'm having, the one in the center, we'll start with that. We'll go chronological. The grammar of the Hebrew tongue. This was produced by Judah Monas, who was the first Jew in the colonies to receive an advanced degree. He taught Hebrew at Harvard College at the time and taught thousands and thousands of political leaders and scholars and religious leaders over his career, which spanned almost 40 years. And this copy is particularly interesting because, as you'll see in the display that we have set up in the neighboring room, that it's signed by a man named John Hancock. Now, John Hancock, not the famous John Hancock with the large signature, but his grandfather is likely his grandfather that owned this book as a student. And it just shows the way that the Bible was even embedded within the educational systems in the colonial era, and the influence that it would have on the leaders that it would produce, these systems would produce. The one on the lower left is John Brown's Self-Interpreting Bible. So this was published in 1791, and it's coming on this wave of Bible publications after the Revolution. And this one's particularly unique because Bibles of this size, and well, actually most Bibles in this period were published using a method called the subscription method. So they wouldn't publish an entire Bible all at once. You would subscribe and you would pay certain monthly dues and you would receive quires of the text as they were produced by the publisher. It was a way of offsetting costs and sharing risk. for these publishers. Well, this one's famous because it actually published its list of subscribers, hundreds of subscribers that paid for the publication of this text. The first one that they list is a guy named George Washington. Okay, and the others are John Jay, all these founding figures who were instrumental in the formation of this country subscribed to this Bible. And in fact, I learned in the process of developing this exhibition that we'll be doing is down at the Masonic, I forgot their name, it's down in Northern Virginia. It's the Masonic Memorial dedicated to George Washington. Anyway, they have a lot of material and texts that are from George Washington's life, including the family Bible. Okay, and what's the family Bible? It's the John Brown Bible that he subscribed to. So it has all the notes and some of the family lineage and genealogy in there. So it's a wonderful piece to bring. And what's unique about this one is it has this wonderful illustration near the title page. This is called a frontispiece. And you can't see it here, but if you come and look at the Bible, when you come see the display, you'll notice three figures. Okay, one is seated, wearing a Native American headdress. That's the personification of America. And there are two other figures, Greek-looking women that are, one is the personification of liberty, and one is the personification of peace. And it's peace that's handing America, who's seated there, a Bible. So peace and liberty are presenting America with a Bible. So again, going back to what I mentioned a little bit earlier of the importance of the Bible in the minds of colonists, of many colonists, for the success of the nation. But that's not all. We have to the 19th century, we have a Tekim Sopherim, which is a model Torah text that scribes would use to copy the Torah and to check their work for its accuracy. Now, the exact time period of this is roughly the 19th century. There's not a lot of identification marks on these types of texts because they're so holy. So we do know, though, from a few signatures that you find within the text, that this was owned by a man named Jacob Sarna, who is the grandfather of the wonderful scholar and advisor to the museum, Jonathan Sarna at Brandeis University. And we actually had been working with Jonathan for quite some time, but we did not know that his ancestors owned this text until we started doing some provenance research on it. It's pretty remarkable. But again, it goes to the shared history between Jews and Christians, because this is unique in the sense that it's handwritten. Most of the model texts in the 19th century actually were printed. So this is unique in itself. But the production of the Bible in the 19th century was widespread, and the industry included both Jews and Christians who were making groundbreaking contributions. And then finally, we have the Revised Standard Version. This was a landmark text that was published in 1952. And this was published by the National Council of Churches. And what's unique about this, they brought together, it's the National Council of Churches, but this is an ecumenical group. Okay, and in the translation committee included people from a wide swath of religious backgrounds, including Jews, Anglicans, Baptists, and a number of other traditions. And they came together to update and produce a text that was more widely readable and hopefully more available for average people. And by the 1990s, it had sold over 55 million copies. 55 million copies is quite remarkable. And it would be revised again and again, and it'd be influential in a number of other translations published in the 1990s. So we're absolutely thrilled to show you these objects. And Aaron, you want to add anything else?
Yeah, two really wonderful announcements that we want to give. And it's been floated already, so we'll start first with this. The objects that you see at the top, the Tikkun Sopherim and the Revised Standard Version, those are donations from the Museum of the Bible to Ocean Reef. And so, yeah, it's if we tell you why these two texts, when we first started the idea of how do we build our connection still with Ocean Reef, how do we strengthen the partnership, We were thinking about what makes this chapel special and the way that you are so interfaith and the way that you bring these different groups together. And these two texts really kind of speak to that engagement of bringing these communities together, right? So we have our Hebrew text, but also this text of the New Revised Standard Version, this first edition that has the Apocrypha in it. For our Catholic brothers and sisters, it has a text that is widely recognized amongst these Christian groups. And so we're so excited that there's a case that we have brought with us as well to, we didn't bring it with us. These gentlemen actually put it together. I can't believe they did that. It's really hard work. But we have it here so it can be permanently here with you, these two objects. We're excited for these two things. We're excited to continue to build the unity between our two places and the wonderful work that God is doing amongst all of us. So thank you.
So with that, I want to thank Aaron. I want to thank Anthony. We are a very grateful community for everything that the MOB has done for us, and we look forward to working with you in the future for many years to come. I want to thank Ambassador Oren and Dr. Oz. Incredible presentation, important talk on subject matter pertinent to all of our lives and everyone in this polarized world. I would also be remiss if I didn't thank the incredible team that devotes itself countless hours serving the chapel community. To our staff, Julia, Jessica, Annalise, Kimberly, Bill, and now Joy, thank you not only for tonight, but for everything you do for the community here. I know Alex Tonarelli is somewhere here in the audience. Alex, I want to thank you and the Ocean Reef Club for all your support. We couldn't have a better partner than working with you. And when there's a problem, you've never let us down. And I know for a fact, the next time I have to make a phone call, you'll not let me down either. But really, I need to thank each and every one of you. You guys are why we do this. You guys are our friends, your family. You've devoted countless hours to the chapel. You've devoted yourselves to a mission of unity, of value, and of faith. We cannot thank you enough for making this community what it is today. The chapel has become the spiritual heart of Ocean Reef, and it is just a phenomenal place to be. And with that, we thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.